Junior year, college. I'd swapped the crowded dorms for a student apartment building, a supposedly more independent living situation. My roommate, David, was kind of assigned by the school, basically, someone else who needed a roomie. Seemed like a decent guy at first, friendly, polite, always offering a smile and striking up small talk. But as days turned into weeks, David started acting strange, little quirks and behaviors that set my nerves on edge. It began with David lingering in my room way too much, peppering me with intrusive questions about my life and poking around my stuff with a casualness that felt like a violation of my personal space. Brushing it off as harmless curiosity felt weird, but the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I got. Then came the late-night noises from his room, talking, shuffling, stuff that just didn't sit right with me. Trying to ignore it, telling myself it was just TV or a phone call, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. One sleepless night, fueled by the weird sounds from David's room, I decided to investigate. Tiptoeing down the hall, I pressed my ear against his door, straining to hear what was going on. What I heard was just plain creepy, David whispering to himself, his voice low and muffled. Then, just as abruptly as it started, it stopped. Dead silence. Then, my name, Jeff. Did he somehow know I was there? Quickly and quietly, I tiptoed back to my room, crawling into bed, a million questions swirling. Why the whispering? What was he hiding? Sleepwalking? But how did he know I was outside his door? Unease gnawed at me like a persistent rodent. The next day, the previous night replayed in my head on a loop. Days turned into weeks, the sounds persisted, and my paranoia skyrocketed. I couldn't shake the feeling David was hiding something. His behavior got stranger too, subtle changes, like darting glances and furtive movements that made me feel like he was constantly on guard. One night, jolted awake at some ungodly hour, I heard David whispering outside my door, right in the hallway. Freaked out, I wondered if he was sleepwalking. Going to the door, I pressed my ear against it, just like before. The whispering stopped, then David's voice again, Jeff. This time, I answered, yeah, you good? No reply, just his footsteps shuffling away like a startled cat. The following night, the sound of my bedroom door closing woke me up. Then David's footsteps walking away. This was getting out of control. The next day, I decided to confront him about the possible sleepwalking. I told him I'd been hearing him wandering around at night, even heard him close my door the night before. Asking if he had a history of sleepwalking or any sleep disorders, he seemed flustered at first, then mumbled something about occasional sleepwalking. Didn't buy it for a second. Something was definitely up. Driven by a nagging sense of something wrong, I decided to search David's room. Risky, but I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. Waiting until he was out, I crept in, knowing I wouldn't have much time. A quick search through drawers and closets turned up nothing, until just as I was about to give up, I found it. A small, hidden drawer tucked away in the back of his closet, like a secret compartment in a spy movie. My blood ran cold as I pulled it open. A collection of photographs. Dozens of them. Mostly of me, asleep. And another guy, about our age. Mixed together, taken from all angles, some close-ups so detailed I could see my pores and individual hair strands. Stomach churning, I realized what I was looking at. David had been secretly taking pictures of me while I slept, without my knowledge or consent. Living with a creepy voyeur who got his kicks from these pictures. Unacceptable. Violated. I wanted answers, but I was afraid. Afraid of his reaction, afraid of what might happen if I confronted him alone. So, I took a picture of the drawer's contents and pocketed a handful of photos as evidence. Packing my things as quickly and efficiently as I could, I showed the pictures to student housing the next day. They took action, and I was assigned a new apartment, with a normal roommate situation, thank goodness. Never spoke to David again. Even now, years later, those chilling photographs and David's creepy late-night activities haunt me. And the other guy in the pictures, probably his old roommate, but I never found out his name. Who knows, maybe he found out David's secret too, and that's why he wasn't there anymore. I asked around if anyone knew who that guy was, but everyone I asked said they didn't know. Except for one man who was here many years ago, and he said that guy had died 10 years ago.
So, at 23, a new job meant moving out of state. Thankfully, I'm back in my hometown now, working at the local office. But back then, finding an affordable place was key. I plastered myself across roommate websites, Facebook, Craigslist, Twitter, even the neighborhood subreddit. A guy named Rob messaged me on Facebook, offering a room in his house. Checking his pictures, he seemed normal enough. I was okay with a male roommate as long as they weren't creepy. Parents weren't thrilled, but hey, gotta do what you gotta do. We FaceTimed, and he gave me a virtual tour. Apparently, he owned the place, a modest house in town, 10 minutes from my new office. Rob seemed alright, no bad vibes. The price was fair, the rules reasonable. He even said I could move in right away. That was perfect. A week later, I was packed and ready to go. Rob met me at the house, key in hand. First thing I noticed, he was short, barely reaching my eye level. He helped with the heavy bags and showed me my room, already furnished. Apparently, a friend had just moved out. New pillows and sheets were a must, of course. The rest of the day was spent settling in. Rob seemed eager to get to know me, but the vibes weren't overly friendly. The next day, Sunday, Rob offered to show me around town. Not super keen, but I agreed for a good first impression. We cruised the usual spots, shopping centers, restaurants, then he suggested lunch. I wasn't hungry, especially for a sit-down lunch that felt a bit like a date. I just needed a room, not a roommate with the wrong idea. Declining lunch, I politely shot down drinks too, work nights and all. He got a little pushy, insisting on just a couple, but I maintained my polite another time, and he finally dropped it. The rest of the car ride was quiet, almost sulky. That week at work flew by, and by the time I got home to do laundry, something was off. My clothes hamper seemed disturbed. Not how I left them. Then, loading the washing machine, a horrifying realization, a pair of underwear was missing. My room was ransacked top to bottom, 5 times over. Gone. The thought of Rob, no, I refused to believe it. But confronting him? Absolutely not. Suddenly, a lock on my bedroom door became a priority. While Rob was out, I swapped the doorknob for a lockable one from Ace Hardware. I'd tell him later. He didn't come home that night, his schedule random at best. That night, I awoke to a bang on my door, Rob, furious, calling my name. It was 1:30 a.m. Feigning sleep felt like the safest option. It had to be about the doorknob, right? Bingo. The next morning, a barrage of texts from Rob demanded, "We need to talk," when I got home. My simple reply, "This about the doorknob?" His response, "Yes. It comes off today." An apology for not mentioning it earlier was met with a "back on today" reply. The tone of his texts, nasty, weird. My next response was carefully crafted. I mentioned being a girl and the importance of feeling safe with a lockable door. His reply, slightly nicer, still affirmed no, and a demand for the old doorknob back. Confused and upset, I did break his rule, but how did he know? The old doorknob wasn't exactly on display. The thought of him trying to get in that night chilled me. The next day, the doorknob was back, and I returned to Ace Hardware. Things went downhill fast from there. One day, Rob was out when a knock on the door sent my heart racing. A girl, about my age, appeared on the doorstep. Asking if I lived with Rob, her warning was stark, "Get out." Now, Rob has restraining orders from multiple women. He's a dangerous stalker. Speechless, I asked how she knew. Apparently, She knew he was looking for a roommate, and seeing me move in wasn't a surprise. She waited until he was gone to warn me. Totally relieved, battling with the terror that gripped me tighter. I'd already paid rent for the month. She offered help, and I took her number with a grateful heart. Packing began immediately, the hunt for a new place a desperate priority. A sublet studio apartment across town, a bit pricier, became my salvation. Studio apartment sublet for a little more money. I contacted the poster of the ad and she told me I could move in as soon as possible. Perfect, now I just needed to tell Rob and get my money back. I started packing some of my stuff into my car and I texted him that I'd have to be moving out tomorrow as something with my family came up and I needed to go home. He didn't answer. He got back to the house about an hour later and asked me about my text. I came up with my best fake story possible and he said yeah, he'll give me the money back tomorrow after he goes to the bank. I was super relieved. About an hour later he knocked on my door. And then he said, by chance did some girl say something to you? I simply said no. What do you mean? And he said, never mind. It just seems like you're running away out of here for another reason. I insisted that it was purely because of the family reasons. He said okay, and left sadly. Although the story didn't end there. I woke up that night and screamed at the top of my lungs when I saw a black figure sitting on the end of the bed. It was Rob. He turned and put his hand on my mouth and said, be silent. I said, please don't hurt me, and he responded, why would I hurt you? I knew someone said something to you. Don't believe what these girls say. I said, you're scaring me, and this part is still just as insane to me as it was in that moment. He started to caress my leg and he said, I don't mean to scare you. Right after I said he's scaring me, I got out of the bed and ran for the door and he screamed at me to stop. I ran outside with my phone in hand and called the police. I hid in the bush until they showed up and I explained the entire situation to them. They made Rob come outside and give his side of the story. Basically, I told them I just want to get all my stuff out of the room. And I'm leaving, so the cops stayed there as I collected the remainder of my stuff and brought it all to my car. I also insisted on Rob then giving me the money back while the police were there, and he did. So actually the whole time the police were there he tried his best to act like some normal dude. I could tell one of the officers then pulled me to the side to tell me that this guy had been arrested before for other incidents with women, but Rob denied ever coming in my room or touching me or anything, so it was all he said, she said. I left the house and went straight to a hotel for the night. The next day I moved into the studio apartment. Luckily the girl who posted it was able to facilitate my quick moving in. I have never, and will never live in another man's apartment, who's not my boyfriend or husband ever again, or just anyone I don't know for that matter.